Hello,
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So, obviously you are the director of the 6 episodes of Loki. And one of the things I'm really fascinated about with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Disney Plus series is this unique marriage of director to material. What in
Mhm.
your previous career and experience has led you to this moment? What has prepared you for taking on something of this scale?
Okay, so initially before you said scale, I was going to be like a temp because I worked in so many offices. I cannot even tell you. And honestly, a big part of, but I would say with the temping though, I worked for the NHS, which is National Health Service, for a while, about nearly 2.5 years as a secretary. But my boss there was amazing. And I think I honestly learned how to run a team through him, through Ola. And I just, so credit to him. But I would also say, in terms of scale, I mean, nothing can ever prepare you, right, for the jump up because, on this, like, I hadn't done effects, for example, before, but I wasn't just going to hand it off and be like, okay, well, I'll, hone in with the actors and then,
Mhm.
the effects, hopefully someone will sort that out. I was like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I will just learn how to do it. But the thing you have working with Marvel is you're working with the best people in the business. And I think for me, that was a joy because, I got to learn how to do so many different types of effects from these amazing practitioners. And I think for me, it was about going in confidently. Okay, so for example, like the Time Theatre, in the script originally, there were, how that was written was, we then see this memory from Loki's life or this memory. And I
Right.
feel like there could have been a version where you would just cut full screen to like the moment from the Marvel movie.
Mhm.
And sorry, by the way, my dog is licking himself and I'm making so much noise.
That's okay. My
Sorry.
my my
Sorry.
cat is bothering me as well.
Sorry,
Just
I
like
could hear him and I was like, dude. Anyway, so sorry. As I was saying, yeah, so the Time Theatre. So basically, there's a world where we could have just cut full screen to moments. And
Sure.
I was like, look, I think my pitch for this is that, like I love the movie Minority Report. And there's a moment
Mhm.
in that where Tom Cruise, he sees his wife who's no longer there, but she's this full 3D projection. And it's
Right.
painful, right? Because he feels like he could reach out and touch her, but she's not real. And I think that really inspired me for the Time Theatre because I was like, let's not just cut to clips. Let's make it like a play of his life because, we have a brilliant actor in Tom Hiddleston. As an MCU fan, I want to see how this Loki is going to react to moments that we were all like, what the hell, watching it as an audience. So that, and, I knew what I wanted the end result to look like. I didn't necessarily know what the execution would be. But I think that was the thing. And that's why when you do something of this scale, your team are so vital, right? Because as a director, you have an idea of the overall tone and the look of the show and how you want people to emotionally feel, but you're nothing without your team. And I think for me on this, the thing that I loved about it so much was that I really did have like the best team. Like, I feel like I found my people, like Kazra, Autumn, Christine, Natalie Holt. Like, I think something that was really key when I was bringing on all my HODs was that they were all a little bit low-key. They were all a little bit mischievous. They used to all tease me a lot, I realized. And I was like, oh, have I just like hired all these people with like a really cheeky sense of humor? But you feel it in their work and they all love storytelling. And I think the thing that was all key for us was everyone on this, like they're all brilliant in their own field, but none of us had worked on something of this scale. And I
Mhm.
think that really lit a fire under all me and my team and united us because we were like, we know we can do this. We just need to show people we can do this. And I think that, and also just being like, let's just try and make it the best thing we can. So, yeah, so I feel very lucky to have had such a brilliant team around me.
You talked about, I want to dive into your relationship with your crafts team in a second, but you talked about your temp experience. I know that you brought some of that practical experience into the project, particularly with the bureaucracy of the TVA.
Yeah.
But one of the things I think is so important about something like this is that you just can't throw the multiverse and time travel and all of this at an audience without anchoring them in a sense of humanity and without giving them human touches. Tell me some of those other touches that you gave or that you pulled out of the material as a director.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for me, for example, with the technology, like retro futuristic technology in sci-fi, but also in comic books, like we've seen a lot of it. But for me, for example, working in multiple offices, some of the computers I worked on should have been thrown out years ago. You know what I mean? But they were like, well, it's not broken and it still turns on. So until it doesn't turn on anymore, we're not replacing it. So, but that for me felt very real. Or like, you know, if you work in a very bureaucratic situation, being like, oh, well, can I get this thing through, please? And they're like, well, you'll have to go to this department and get this signed. And then you have to wait 2 weeks. And like, I think that was the fun thing with looking at the TVA, was like, yeah, that feels very TVA, because there is all this red tape to get through. And I think it's like everything, right? I think for me, like the genre films I go back to again and again that I love, they have heart and warmth and good character, and they're who are pulling us through the stories. But it's like you said, like you needed these grounded, relatable situations. You know, I think, you know, like Loki and Thor, we love their relationship. We aren't gods, but, you know, we have family,
Right.
you know, or friends or people where we have had relationships like that. And I think that's the real key thing, is make the emotions feel grounded and real. So if you take off the bells and whistles of a project, it still has something that's pulling you through this kind of fantastical sci-fi world.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you then take that approach and figure out how to make time travel and concepts of the multiverse? Because this project opens up the multiverse for so many films coming after it. How do you make that relatable or understandable to, you know, the casual, not the Marvel comics nerds like me, but the casual viewers?
Sure. Yeah. I think honestly, so I would say in terms of time travel, so for example, the Miss Minutes animation video at the very
Yes.
beginning, we did multiple versions just working on the script of that, because like you said, and we tested it out because we wanted to make sure, like you said, that, you know, someone who's so new to Marvel can watch it and understand what those rules are. And then we have fun nods hidden in there so that, yeah, the comic book fans will be like, oh, that's cool. Does it mean that or does it mean that? So I think that was the real balancing act with that. And in terms of time travel, honestly, I remember, so when I joined, obviously, I remember talking to Michael and his team, the writers, and they drew this drawing, which became our tempad. It was like the line and the line coming off it. And I was like, oh, I get it now. And I remember being like, we should just use that. And they were like, oh, really? I was like, yeah. I was like, totally. I was like, I understand completely now what the concept is, and we should put that on the tempad. And it was the same, like at the end of the show in episode 6, you know, me and the concept artist, you know, we're talking about all these different ways, like how do we show the timeline? How do we, and something they pitched, Darren, our storyboard artist, which I thought was genius. He said, what if it's circular? And I was like, oh, that's amazing. Because we've only seen it as like a flat line on the tempad. That also, again, feels so human to me, right? With like human discovery is like, you know, like we used to think the earth was flat, for example. And I like the idea that even the TVA, they only see it as a straight line. And then when we go to the end of time, it's like, well, actually, no, it's different to what you would anticipate. So I think that was really key for us. But then taking imagery, like the branches coming off it, they look like they have on the tempad. So I think it's actually very simple imagery. But I think that's the real key thing, like you said, is like just trying to make sure those beats work, because then no one's thinking about that and they can enjoy the story, which is always the hope.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
I'd like to shift a little bit to the actor. So you're obviously working with Tom Hiddleston, who has done Loki for, you know, a decade plus and has been fantastic as an iconic performance. But then you're also in Loki introducing different actors to play variants of Loki. They're not physically the same people, but they are different takes on Loki. How do you as a director work with those actors to make sure that they're not, I mean, were you at all concerned that they were completely out of bounds from what Tom was doing? Like, you know, how does that relationship work out?
Yeah, sure. I think, truthfully, I think it's just because the thing, right? You don't want to find an actor who's just doing an impression of what Tom's done.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that's even then we have a line in it that's like, they're not a photocopy of our Loki, because that's the thing. A variant, they aren't the same person. For me, it's about spirit and soul. It's like their souls are the same in the sense that, you know, we'll see aspects that are similar, like they're mischievous. There's great pain and regret across all the Lokis, which I think you feel, for example, with Richard E. Grant's character when he has that beautiful speech in episode 5 about how he, you know, regrets what happened with his brother. And I think you do see that echo across with all the Lokis, but the circumstances are different because they've had different lives. But with the actors, I think also the key thing is, you know, you're working with incredible talent. it's also about giving them room to breathe and to play. Because I feel like if you don't do that, you're not going to get like these kind of, well, you know, these rounded performances. And also the fun things, like Tom said with his Loki in the show, was we need to find new keys on the piano. You know, we'll definitely give people what they're expecting, but very Loki is also going to be something they don't expect. And I think that was the fun thing, is like, you know, what truly makes us us, and yeah, how much is nature, how much is nurture. And I think that was the key thing with all the actors, and particularly episode 5, the fun of that was, yeah, how do we capture that? Because, you know, like Kid Loki, how do we show this very innocent version of Loki, who is also beloved from the comics? So I was like, we've got to get, you know, Kid Loki right. But I think for honestly, it's just casting it right and finding a little bit of that Loki essence, I suppose, in everyone you're casting, and then just giving the actor enough room to play. Because I think that's the key thing, honestly, is, you know, if it doesn't work, something you try, you just don't put it in the movie. And if you discover something new and cool, then that's a great new step forward for the character anyway.
Yeah, I love this idea of the lived experience that shifts and changes each of the Lokis, because, you know, obviously Sylvie, the variant, has had such
Yeah.
a traumatic life, and that it never changes her direction. Like, she does a terrible thing at the end, which obviously changes everything. But it's, you know, I was talking to Michael Waldron about this, you know, Loki himself has people reaching out to him to sort of help him nurture and psychoanalyze himself, self-analyze himself. He's growing a little bit, but she doesn't have that person. She just keeps on going. And I just wanted to say I love that concept of the live experience changing all these Lokis.
Well,
Shifting a little bit to the crafts, your visuals feel very familiar. You have a lot of visual inspirations from all over film and cinema history. I love that. I love the amber hues that seem like they came from, you know, a Fincher film. There's a little bit of Silence of the Lambs in there. Talk to me about those visual inspirations.
I mean, I stole from everyone. I think we can just
Good for you.
just get it out there now. But yeah, I think for me it was like, because I love sci-fi, and you know, there's a big playground with Loki, because, you know, we're setting up a new corner of the MCU with the TVA. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the comics, and, you know, like they had that beautiful art of like the rows of desks like extending into infinity. So for me, I was like, oh wow, sorry. So I was like, well, how do I take that visual but bring it into the office space? So for example, in like the cafeteria, we took that look completely and did extend it. And I was like, well, let's do that for like everywhere in the TVA, and like the viewpoint should feel like it's going off into infinity. But then along with that, it's like, you know, these guys they think they're the good guys of the universe. So you do have this kind of Mad Men kind of aesthetic running through it. But at the same time, there's an Orwellian feeling. So yeah, brutalist architecture, Blade Runner obviously is a reference, and, you know, Brazil for sure with the technology. Because like I said, with the temping, the retrofuturistic tech was just too fun to me. And I liked, and it's almost that thing, if you want to give people glimpses of something that feels familiar, but also give a kind of sci-fi twist on it. I mean, but we have references everywhere. Even like the font on the computers is similar to Alien. And yeah, I mean, I love sci-fi. So I just was like, how do I make this a big love letter to sci-fi? And like Lamentus and Arwana, like I was inspired by Children and Men. But I think the key thing is, you know, you pull from all these different visual references, but I'm always going to go back to story. So for example, like with the look of the show, when I read the first and second script, if there's a mystery running through it, and Sylvie's always attacking from the shadows. And I was like, well, that's very like film noir to me and detective. So I was like, what if we make the whole show look like that? Because the fun thing for me is you initially think, obviously, it's about who's this variant of me, who is this person? But then the mystery unravels again, and it's like, wait, no, who is behind the TVA? So it felt appropriate to me to give the whole show this kind of unusual look in that sense.
Right. Well, and then by the time you get to who's behind all of this, it's the man behind the curtain. It's the Wizard of Oz.
Exactly.
Which is fantastic. You talked about your team and assembling this team and having just these brilliant craftspersons working with you on this project. Talk to me about your relationship with them, costumes and production design. I mean, you've already mentioned a little bit about the retrofuturistic touches that you wanted to pursue. But talk to me about working with those crafts departments.
Yeah, I think honestly, the more I think about it, I feel like I hired a team of Lokis because they were all very cheeky and very funny, but also really good with heart and emotion. And it was like Kazra, for example, he would always, like, I remember he had sketches done for the TVA, and like the idea of Loki going into rooms that were cubes and dropped, that's his idea. And I remember that he drew in that cat into one of the rooms, and I was like, oh my God, that's so genius. Because again, like it was really important to me that the TVA felt like somewhere where it's an office where people don't go home. They just pull constant all-nighters. So of course the guy's going to have his cat there because he never leaves the room. And I thought that to me was so funny, but also like it felt very Hitchhiker's Guide, and it had that kind of fun, like humor to it. And I think with me and Kazra, like the moment we met, I remember we both had like, he had pictures of old computers in his pitch that were also in my pitch. And I was like, well, we're already on this completely the same wavelength here, and we share the same taste. So after that, it was honestly just us, I think, trying to make the best story we could. And like Christine was the same, like, you know, Christine Wada, my costume designer, it was a challenge, right? Because it's a whole new corner of the MCU. We're definitely giving it kind of this Mad Men aesthetic in terms of the clothes, but also twisting it. You know, like she did these really cool kind of like, I think I'm pretty certain like seams here, but like these kind of aspects of the shirt, which are very sci-fi and a little bit different. And it's always that balance, like with Kazra, the familiarity mixed with the new, basically. And Autumn Doral, I knew that she was the right DP the moment I met her, because she's talking about lighting like it's a character, and she's always emotionally led by a scene. And like I said, like I love working with actors, and for me, I'm always going to be like, who holds the power in the scene? How do I want the audience to feel in terms of, you know, like where Loki's at in this moment? And, you know, Autumn and me would talk, for example, we just spoke in film references. Like I remember episode 5 where they're all stood on the hill. She was like, oh, let's do it like The Outsiders after I blocked it. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I was like, let's definitely do that. And then, you know, sometimes I'd be like, oh, could we do this or try this? And, you know, so I think the key thing is, the thing you can always hope for with your team, obviously, is like, you know, it's hard enough making a film or show in like a normal situation,
Sure.
but doing it in a pandemic, like that's a lot to ask of people. And I really felt like, you know, like all of the team really stepped up and just threw everything into it. And I think the key thing as well was my HODs were in the same boat as me. Like they were all very accomplished and had done amazing work, but none of us had ever done anything of this scale before. Right. And I think that's the real key thing, right, in anyone's career, is you get that chance to work at that level, and it's like, well, we just have to go for it. Right. So yeah, so I felt very lucky with everyone I worked with. And also Natalie Holt, our composer, like again, you know, like in my pitch, I had like the swan on theremin, for example. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know how we're going to use the theremin. And I ended up putting that song in the show on in Renslayer's office. But I remember being like, but I feel like it should be in here somehow, because it's like a big love letter to sci-fi, but I love electronic music. And I was trying to like blend all this stuff together. And then Natalie Holt comes in, and, you know, she's a classically trained musician, and she's got theremin in there and little bits of electronic, like, because she had this Blade Runner kind of influence style suite, but then also mixed in with classical music, because, and again, she spoke about character. She would be like, the music needs to feel like Loki. It needs to feel big and grand and operatic, but also, you know, have pain in it also, but a little bit of mischievousness and something you don't expect. And I think that was the key thing across everyone, is that everyone loved Loki, but also just always thinking about the story and character. So, yeah.
So last question for you. Obviously, Loki has many implications that will be explored in many different projects within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When you look just at Loki and your experience, what do you hope people take away from it? What did you want them to sort of feel from it and to absorb from it?
I think that this was really key for me. So there's a shot at the end when everything has gone wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that thing he talks about, that Loki's always survived. Because I think for me, you know, we've all had hard times. And I think that for me is a nice message to send to people. And I wanted to, so the shot I'm thinking of, so basically it was just really important to show that he still had fight in him, and that he still wanted to, you know, like he wasn't going to give up. And I think that is very Loki, being like, I'm going to get through this and I'm going to survive. And I feel very bad right now, but there will be a tomorrow. And I think trying to give the audience, for me, something with a sense of hope, because I totally understand for the MCU at the end of our show, it's like, what have they done? But I think that was really important, was showing that he isn't completely defeated by this, you know, like, and it was the shot to explain one, it's in the Time Theater, And you know, he's just got like his head in his hands, and the camera pushes in on him, and it stays with him, and it shows that moment in his mind where he changes and is like, no, I'm going to try and do something about this. And I think for me, that was the really key thing in the show, was showing, you know, Loki goes on such a journey. Like, he makes a friend, he falls in love and learns so much about himself, but just that he'll always survive, I think, was the really key thing for me. And Beautiful. That hopefully that can echo to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly in this pandemic world that we're hopefully coming out of. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you for the project. This was very brilliant. I really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you. Best of luck to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks. Have a nice day.
You as well. Take care.
Thank you.